Good evening, folks, and welcome to tonight's Master Plan Update Steering Committee. Can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance there, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks so much. Okay, folks. First thing we're going to do is introduce a new member, Anna Houston. Anna, would you like to tell the public just a little about yourself, please?
Sure. So my name is Anna Houston, and my family and I moved here to Littleton in July from Denver, Colorado. And we moved here because we thought that the town was everything we would want to live in terms of a nice, smaller community. And it also has a very high-quality school system with less than 1,000 students, which is what my daughter wanted. She is currently a sophomore at Littleton High School, and we've been enjoying our 4 months here. I also have a background in public policy, early childhood education, and corporate strategy.
Thanks so much for stepping forward, Anna, especially after such a short period of time in town. Really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go to the project schedule and progress update this evening. We're going to go over the existing conditions sections discussion. The December public forum will mention content format, the role that the committee members will play in the outreach plan for it. Other board business, go over minutes and budget update, and then adjourn. What I want to hit real quickly, remember folks, tomorrow, town meeting, 7 p.m. at the Littleton Middle School, at the in the gymnasium there, please. Everybody show up. It'd be great to have the whole town there. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but 7 December is the public forum, and again, that'll be at the middle school, folks. So with that, anybody have any open comments you'd like to make before we jump into the agenda? Project schedule and progress update, please.
Great. So Marn had asked for an update on where we are versus where we said we would be, as we laid out in the very beginning. So we're probably about 70% the way through the timeline of the project. So we're coming up on certainly a critical time as we're moving into the recommendations and the implementation stages prior to the preparation of the final plan. So I just prepared a quick schedule for everyone. The blue line on top is the original schedule that I think we presented at the first master plan committee meeting, and the gold yellowish line on the bottom is the current schedule. And you can see we're still slated to finish up on time, presenting the draft plan in February, and the final plan having ready, obviously, prior to town meeting, which is in May. And we're a little bit behind with the existing conditions report, but working on the catch-up period for the recommendations and the fiscal impact. One change that I did want to mention would be for the third townwide workshop. Originally, we had thought that might happen in March. In talking with Judy last week, we were thinking we may move that up to February, because that's really going to be, I think, a discussion of the recommendations and the implementation strategies. And we'd really like to have that discussion with the public as we're moving through that piece of it, rather than waiting till later in March, just moving up into February, so that we can, I think, better and more effectively incorporate their input into the formulation of recommendations and implementation strategies.
All right, so it just talks a little bit why, when we look at recommendations, fiscal impact and draft plan haven't moved to the right. But why we think it's a good plan that what we had and will cause us to end up where we are.
I think it was just the push on the getting the inventory done, and the delays in the inventory have just pushed the project schedule a little bit forward. In terms of those specific elements, the project's still slated to wrap up on time.
Yeah, remember, on time for the final plan is April, not May. Remember, Judy and I, we had that email conversation too about that, because in an email it said.
I may have just dropped it.
Yeah, please, because what's important about that is that's when the planning board's going to vote on it. We present to the town in May what the planning board's approved, okay? Because just to remind folks, it's not a town meeting approval item. It's a planning board approval item by statute. So, and I'm not preaching to you, I'm making a comment for an audience. So that's how it gets approached, folks. I want to make sure there's no miscommunication about that misunderstanding. To be clear, it's by Massachusetts statute up to the planning board to approve it. You may recall it was the planning board and the Board of Selectmen that jointly appointed us to take us through the steering part of this. And the final plan is approved by the planning board. That's redundant enough, I think. And then we present in May. Okay? So I want all documentation to reflect that, please.
Yes.
All right, thanks. Things on the schedule? All right, let's move on, please.
Great. So as you know, we have had the existing conditions inventory out for a couple weeks now. It's been online, it's been in paper format around town. Emails have gone out to the list that we've developed based on the public input that we've had. Comments are due, we pushed the due date, I think everyone hopefully is aware, to the 18th. I believe it's Friday, the end of this week. It was originally, I think, the 8th. Comments are still trickling in, so if you have an opportunity to just complete your review and get any comments to Maren, all those are being sent directly to us. It'd be great to have any additional input, and thanks to members of the committee who have supplied comments so far, and also members of the public. It's been really nice to see that people have taken the time to read through it and have provided a lot of thoughtful comments. For this evening, what we had hoped to do was just to run through some of the comments that we wanted to acknowledge the comments that we have so far and acknowledge that we're going to address them in one way or another. So I thought I was just going to go through some of the comments we received by each of the different planning elements that are in the inventory. There are some that I'll glance over and say, yes, we're definitely going to address this. Just wanted to let you know that this was a comment. But there are a couple within each of the inventory elements that I'd really like some input on from the committee. It could be clarity in some cases, or it could be, there's been some suggestions to remove pieces of certain chapters, and we'd really like to get your input on that before, making any substantive changes to the document. So if it's okay with you, I'll just go through element by element.
And before you do that, reiterate for all of us, what's the purpose of creating an existing conditions report?
It's really so that we can baseline where the town was as we look back, and then more importantly, where the town is today in relation to all the different elements.
I said.
And this is not the master plan in itself, this is just the inventory. It's really the first piece of the whole master plan.
It's primarily historical and a trailing indicator, not a leading indicator.
Yep,
Okay.
A snapshot, so years later, we look at this, what were we thinking at the time?
exactly. Yep.
But also you have to know where you are, because you determine where you want to go. Well, how are you going to get there? You need to know where you are, where the deficits are, where the trends are, so you can make the steps, identify the steps.
And make sure everybody's on common ground and folks in the public understood what this particular document's purpose is. So, thank you.
Good point.
So just going through, I'll let you sort of read through some of the comments. I'll just hit on some of the big ones. As you can see, there's a couple of just missing information pieces that folks had asked us to add in. We'll certainly do that. That's really the first three comments up there on land use. We're going to look into what attributed to the large decrease in transportation in terms of the land use category since 1971. I think it decreased by something like 23% of the land area, so we just want to look into that a little bit more. We're going to definitely provide an explanation of 40B, especially for people who aren't necessarily familiar with that housing term. So that was a great comment. There was one comment about in the beginning of each of the inventory chapters, we tried to highlight just some of the key pieces, some of the important factors that we tried to tease out from the lengthy document. But there was kind of an overarching comment, one specific to land use, one to a few others, about the key findings box, sort of not having a lot of the key components that were in some of the chapters. So we're going to try and go back, revisit that, see if we can tease out some more important facts to add in there. Happy to have your input on that if other folks around the committee are finding that as well.
This is not, it's not hitting high points, or it's not comprehensive enough?
Yeah, I think
It's missing some.
I think the feeling was that it's missing some
Okay.
key pieces there.
I found that you had a lot of points in the text in that particular area, as you do in many of the other elements. I mean, you can't, it's a first draft, I understand that. What was really striking is that in the land use especially, you mentioned, or it's been mentioned, for example, a couple of times, that we have a lot of forest land. However, it's really striking, and it's even more striking when you put it together with your map. And this is sort of typical. If you had that in the box without comment, well, I mean, move it in the box, I think that sends a message, especially given the fact that some of the pieces are not contiguous. Which defines the character of the town when you don't have contiguous whatever, whether it's forest or open land or whatever. And that's a fact, not an interpretation. It's that's the kind of stuff that would be very useful for someone who wants to, what's going on here? But it hits you right in the eye.
Yeah, like a really good snapshot of land use, for instance.
Yeah.
What's going on. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
That doesn't, unless it's on a different slide, it doesn't seem to address that, in very recent history, the planning board and the town had engaged in, a very significant change in the zoning bylaws relative to the village district zoning, kind of a recognition of a focus on the common area as a special case, and then also embracing the concept of kind of, putting the rules aside if both parties can work together. But, it hasn't been on the books long enough for it to have been utilized much, but I think there should be a recognition that that's, this whole process is taking place hot on the heels of that being adopted. It's not like we hadn't been thinking or acting on planning issues prior to this.
Yeah. Land use is sort of divided up into two sections. One is the actual land use, the sort of evolution of the land in the town. The second piece is all about the zoning bylaw. Goes over the different districts, and we do mention the Littleton Common Overlay District.
Okay,
the
so
Beaver Brook Overlay.
all right,
Yeah.
wasn't sure if it was
Yeah.
somewhere
Oh,
else.
yeah, it's there.
It's not here, that's all.
Well, these are comments,
Yep.
right? These
Yeah.
are comments.
This isn't
These
an-
are-
this
This
isn't-
is not it. These are just commentaries.
Well, I just added some commentary.
It's there.
One thing I did want to just bring up with the committee, there was a comment talking about that the town's not necessarily rural anymore. It's really more suburban in nature, with even urban elements integrated into the town. We're trying to not necessarily classify the town as rural, because I don't think anybody on the master plan team necessarily thinks it's rural. But there are what we were trying to refer to as rural characteristics of the town, as in the town still does have working farms, for instance. It does still have some scenic views and scenic vistas as you drive through. Now, obviously, a lot of that has changed over the last 20 or 30 years with the increase in development, but we were just wondering, do you feel it's still appropriate to reference the rural characteristics of the town, or should we really focus on?
I would argue that there are more rural characteristics than urban. I don't even know if there are any truly urban characteristics. I'm
And the
stretching my
public
imagination
refers to
find-
rural
yeah.
characteristics.
And I think if you think of it as rural characteristics versus which is a relative definition or a relative term, versus calling it a rural community, which is more of an absolute designation, I think that's perfectly appropriate. Now, the next time we do the master plan, it might be even harder to convey that, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, my problem with having that judgment made, where it's almost to your point, Mike, of saying rural or suburban, I have no axe to grind. I don't really care how someone thinks about it. But in the inventory, where you're trying to say where we are, maybe remaining silent on what the aspirations or beliefs are, interpretation may be the opinion or judgment of whether or not we're rural or whatever, maybe have to do with where we want to be, given where we want to go to as opposed to where we are. And the inventory basically is, to me, should be just, this is what we are. We have non-contiguous this, we have highly centralized services, we have all these we don't have to say if it's suburban or urban or rural or semi-suburban or all the, because they do have implications, these terms do have implications and definitions formally in both government and elsewhere. So that's how we're going to get labeled. So, but perception does matter, and we are supposed to be challenging the community to think about itself, and I think baseline is a good place to go. This is where our forests are, this is where our... So I would recommend staying neutral and not trying to put into the text of the inventory what you were referring to, Paul, about basically doing large projections about what the data may mean.
So there are, however, some characteristics or features that one could objectively consider as rural characteristics. For example, the existence of farmlands that are visible, stone walls. Those are, in kind of planning terminology, considered objectively rural characteristics.
The existing conditions report.
It's a judgment call. It's not, I don't want to bog everyone down, it's just I'm trying to get the inventory as flat, as down to.
As objective,
Yeah,
right.
and so when you put terms in, I've already said it, when you put terms into an inventory that already bent a certain way, you're, as it were.
Yeah, but if you don't
tilting the-
define them, then it's not truly an inventory. You could just say we have stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not an inventory. That's just a.
No, we're not saying we stuff, if you read the
I
text.
know, but I'm
it's
saying that
very
if you
clear.
have, that's why you have to label it in some way, or you're just saying that we have stuff. When you go to inventory a warehouse, you don't say there's stuff in it.
No, you say we
that
have
there's,
boxes here,
widgets
and what is
this
dimension.
and that and the other thing.
Look.
Label it.
If the folks are comfortable with having judgments made in the text of an inventory that defines the town as rural character, suburban character, or semi-rural, or whatever you want to do, all I'm worried about, or I'm concerned about, is making sure that when we go to planning, we don't have the town thinking of itself
Yeah, that's right.
going in.
Well, accepting the notion that Mike makes that, we gotta label it something, if that's the case, then I opt in with the, idea that we have rural characteristics, but I don't, I grew up in a rural town, it's not a rural town. If traffic alone, it's not a rural town. So it's a suburban town with significant rural characteristics. I could consider that accurate personally.
Well, in terms of context, I mean, I'm not sure how prevalent this terminology is in the chapter, but I found one place where it says, despite the changes as it grows, et cetera, Littleton retains much of its rural characteristics and rural character and quality of life. I think it's a factual statement. And I don't think you say rural throughout the place. I think you just bring it up that it says there's elements to it. which I
Exactly,
think
yeah.
is-
You also
I think is
refer to
appropriate.
suburban, too. It's also in the text in various places, you define the town as suburban. So,
Now, if I take you to page 4, we'll go down this rabbit hole, second paragraph, first sentence, as a result of these suburban growth trends,
yeah, I mean, yeah.
I think it's accurate. No
Well,
longer a small rural town, the second sentence, that's probably accurate. So those characterizations, I think, help us understand where we think we are at the very least.
But we're only
Likewise,
8,000
I mean, this
people.
is,
Likewise, on page 3, under the key findings, I think that last bullet very well defines it. Littleton was a quiet rural town, then upgrades, and then Littleton, in the 1960s, became part of the network of suburbs around Boston. So I think that characterizes the before and current state.
All right, so have we addressed what concerns?
yeah, I'm just,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, we ready to move on, folks?
So we're gonna leave it as is? Is that-
Consider what Mike said, and if you need a little bit more guidance on that, you can always go back to Maren and see.
Sure.
But certainly take into consideration, but I think you heard what other folks have said,
Yep.
and see how you best blend that, please. Is that okay?
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
fine, yeah.
All right,
We'll just borrow your glasses.
yeah. All right, go on, please.
And then just the last one under land use, the final bullet there on the bottom. There was a comment about growth and preservation, that it cannot be balanced. There was reference to literature out there that says that it can't be balanced. And that this is an opinion and doesn't belong in the inventory, and that it should be removed from the inventory. It's the team's opinion that moving forward, we had hoped that we would be able to look at the town objectively and see where it might make sense for growth to occur and locations where it might make sense for preservation to occur, to try to achieve some of that balance that we've heard about a lot from people throughout the process. But I just wanted to get your opinion on whether or not that's something you feel can be achieved through the master plan process. And should we leave it in or should we remove it?
Can I speak to that, Paul?
Sure.
Thank you. I think you should leave it in because the concept that I've been touting for quite a while now is to put an overlay south of the railroad tracks all the way to the Boxborough line, an overlay now, not a change in zoning, which would allow a 40R to occur, specifically tailored and crafted so that we would get only single studios, single bedroom, or at the most two-bedroom houses and apartments with a mix of very, very small commercial, like a corner store. or something, so that we'd end up with a village on that end of the town that would be affordable. We could craft into that 40R that, let's say, 60% of it has to be affordable, and we could designate the affordable ceiling as we craft that 40R. And a couple of good things out of that, it would provide a place for our seniors to settle in. It would, the neighborhood would have to have bikeability, walkability. There'd be very few garages. We'd encourage wide bike paths. And not a retirement community, but a new type of walkable community that would have be designed for seniors and for our children, the millennials, because they have no place to live. They're moving into Boston. That's why you see all those big towers going up. That's all about apartments. That's not about business. And that's so that these guys have a place to live. They're couples, they're singles, they have no kids, they have one dog or two dogs. I see them in town because I'm in town all the time. That's why I'm late getting here tonight. And then we're going to lose that resource. We're going to have some balance in town. Then we need to have that. So growth, yeah, I think we should look at growth, but in terms of control, a lot of control, and we can do that through the 40R, through an overlay.
I think the other thing is that the issue of whether or not it can be achieved is almost irrelevant. Are we gonna try? It's the effort and what it's gonna mean for the town by making that effort over the next 10 or 20 years that could have a positive impact. And if we abandon that effort, and we may choose to, or we may realize that we have to over time, but to give up on it that quick is, we may just stop the whole master plan process as far as I'm concerned. Or just let it happen, whatever's gonna happen, is
Before
gonna
you add
happen.
in,
But it's context
one second, please, because Mike's going to go next. Do you have the citation? So we go to that page, just to see the context.
It's in the planning issues at the very end of the land use chapter. I think it might even be
So page 17. It's the first bullet of the planning issues. And it might also be somewhere else, but that's where I found it.
Yeah.
Is it page 17?
Yes.
This is talking housing bylaws here, on Mike 17. Which one is it in, please? My bad.
Land use.
Don't take them down there, Mike.
Phew, how many of those are you giving away? No, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's page 15 on my book, yeah. That's all right. Which paragraphs help you find this book?
Is the heading right there?
Oh,
The first planning issue.
The intent of the planning issues portion is a segue kind of to the next phase, right?
Exactly
So it's-
right.
So, okay.
Yeah.
In that context, it seems reasonable,
Yeah.
but I agree with, in the esoteric, it's not a snapshot issue. This is your intent,
Yeah.
your intent is to pivot towards the status to the future.
Right.
Just the discussion you had, Mike, and the way you're thinking about it, that's the kind of discussion that should be in what we'll call the plan.
Right.
And I think the inventory should be the invitation to it.
right.
Okay, if there is such a thing as balance, what is it? And how do we achieve it? I think that this is, one of the reasons, I admit, I raised this question is to see if there was interest in the committee in defining eventually what balance means. And the answer appears to be, we want the town to think about that and do so. This is an editing trick, okay? Is there a way to get the discussion going and the inventory by pointing out that the town has been grappling with how to, on one hand, allow natural organic growth and natural organic preservation? How do we achieve it, what to achieve it? And I think that would probably be better in the inventory than saying, we want a balance. I have no idea. How many people in town really want a balance? I mean,
Okay, I think we get into this balance, is not a beam that we're balancing. We're not Archimedes trying to move the world with a lever
Yeah.
on a fulcrum
Well,
someplace.
yeah.
I think very simply is there's folks that want zero growth, 100% preservation,
Yep.
and others somewhere along here
Yeah.
where you balance the competing priorities of various people in town. I find nothing wrong in the heading. To say
Probably
it
at
was-
least one person who wants to turn the whole thing into a parking lot.
You do?
Could be.
Or the other committee?
10,000 people, there could be one person
There's
who wants to
got-
do that.
Yeah.
So,
Just saying, every spectrum has two ends.
Yeah.
AJ,
Yes, ma'am.
one of the situations that I've come across in the past is the word balance or balancing oftentimes connotates there's a winner and a loser because one has to be of greater weight than the other, and because very rarely are they equal. So from that perspective, perhaps considering another word, if we don't want to leave that in there, could just be manage growth and preservation,
Yeah,
brilliant.
managing growth
Yeah.
and preservation.
Good with that?
Yep.
Next. We got you on this board for a reason. Thank you. All right.
Sorry, I was just writing that.
No, no, you're
Sure,
good.
at that time. Okay. Transportation, just a couple of quick comments. I won't even really run through these, but we're going to adjust the discussion of communities that are connected to Littleton. There was just some miswording in there. A comment was raised about just a lack of traffic volume data, so we're going to look into that. It's just so that you and everyone at home knows it's really hard. MassDOT doesn't count a lot of the, non-495 or non-Route 2 routes in a lot of the towns that regularly, so we tried to compile what we could, but I'll go back and check with some other sources and see if we
Okay.
can get some.
We often think of 2A, Great Road, most often when we think of traffic counts. But 495, if that's the only one we can get, recent empirical information, would be very useful because we have 3 exits in town. And I was speaking with the police chief and the fire chief. We have a more than the desired share of mishaps
Yeah.
in the town of Littleton because of that. And that's a strain, certainly on resources in the town.
They're almost always the first responders too, before
Yeah.
state police. We had heard
Exactly.
that during our interviews with the
So
police
the
chief.
495 volume, if you could get that, I think that's useful. It helps set a baseline for us. Route 2A, you're going to get the best you can. Got it.
And then we'll just adjust, this was just an update on the complete streets piece. It had been submitted, so we'll adjust.
Anybody have anything else on this one?
The engineering in Lexington has data on Route 2A and 110. Engineering Department in Lexington, Mass DPW.
Okay.
That's where I got, probably 5 or 6 years ago, some information on the traffic counts on those 2 roads.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Give them a specific person you know there, please. Later. But, best,
Governor Baker.
that's one. Okay.
So economic develop, I would say land use and economic development had the most substantial number of comments, so we'll spend a bunch of time on this and then probably a little bit less on the others. So the first couple points, I think, are very easy. The first 3 points, really easy to address. We'll get to those. Some are just updates based on recent real estate transactions that we didn't have when we wrote the chapter. There were some comments, some sort of macro scale comments about the chapter as a whole. One being a comment that economic development doesn't necessarily improve at the town scale. It doesn't really improve the town. They really only see the improvements at the macro level. I think it depends on how you define economic development and how you're looking at the benefits and the impacts of economic development, but would love some feedback on that. If anyone has any thoughts.
Again, here's a case where it was basically put in to see if we were interested in it. And there is the notion that economic development will, quote, help, when the literature, as you probably know, for most of the cases where economic development has been applied to a town, all you really get is you get another town suffering. So most of the, I mean, I'm exaggerating only slightly. Statistically speaking, you get the shifting of resources. There have only been a few cases where economic development per se will help a state, there's no question, and there are various tools for that. But for individual towns, it's a tough haul. And all I'm saying, I'm not interested in selling the idea that it doesn't help. It's just that here's another case where the question of why do we want economic development and what do we mean by it?
Right.
never been clear in this town, given its behaviors, that's all. And its
But
behaviors.
I think when we do speak to it, and Economic Development Committee submits its reports, which you guys have used, I mean, it's clear, other towns might focus cities on job creation or raising values. That's not the case here. It's raising services and revenue, by providing services we don't have in revenue. So I think that's a stated objective, from our economic development report. And just to veer off a little bit, I assume on the common area, if there's no discussion of the lack of sewering there, it means it's coming up somewhere else.
Sure, if you'd like to jump ahead, yeah, we can address that.
No, I'm just wondering,
It is addressed in this
Yeah.
presentation.
The other thing that I would put out there is that any chance we get to be clear that economic development is more than retail development, I think we need to take that opportunity.
Yep.
Because for us sitting here, we kind of get that, there's different varied aspects of it. But for a lot of people, it's, all they're thinking about is more stores, things like that. And that's creates a little bit more of a reaction than a lot of other stuff might, but should as well.
Yeah,
Really.
it doesn't get as much discussion, but at least at the level of the Economic Development Committee, there's been talk about what can we do if we wanted to do what some communities have done in terms of targeting a certain industry to bring in, based
Exactly.
on what our population skill set is, what the areas
Right.
become the known town for X, Y, or
And
Z
are there
industry.
certain types of economic development that help the people who live in town, live and work in town and things like that, and, at a good living,
And
et
that's
cetera,
more
et
at
cetera.
a corporate level than at a
Right.
retail level.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So those things need to be, we need to make sure that that's a consistent theme, or otherwise, we're gonna lose people, because they're just gonna think we're talking about more.
I mean, it
Right.
should be fully defined then.
Yeah, however we wanna do it, I'll leave it to the experts to do it, but just.
But the baseline should be that we currently don't have a proactive approach to that, but we have a recognition that that's a problem. I would
Yeah.
suggest.
Yeah, in this section, right.
Yeah.
I would-
I'm not looking for solutions yet, but
Yep.
just.
I would agree with both of you guys, but it's fluid and it's moving because you get things like the point. Before the point came in, we had no jobs for teenagers. Now we got tons of jobs for teenagers at Donlands and the various restaurants and stores up there now. So that answered one dying need for our kids. I know when my daughter was growing up, there was nothing. So it's fluid, so now that need has been met, but, it really is unique. Our definition of economic development is not like any other towns.
Okay. Get what you need.
I did, thank you. That was good.
Russell?
There was just a question about, are other companies like FIBA or Potpourri, companies that have over, 100 employees, are they also considered large when we're talking about it in the relative nature of IBM, which is obviously a giant in terms of employment in town? So I think we'll probably look at maybe rewording that.
So maybe call IBM giant.
Behemoth.
For the moment.
What's important, and I don't remember, do we have the actual number of Littleton residents who work at IBM? Have we been able to gather that?
When I
We
attend,
don't have it.
Because-
when we attended the meeting, you were at the same meeting. I asked one of the IBM employees who happens, and she told me she knows of 6 more. And they're all at what we'll call the administrative level. There are no, she didn't know of any engineers, so that's anecdotal. And IBM is not going to disclose.
I know one senior person there.
See, IBM, in the term of this particular master plan, is unlikely to go out of business. Likely to stay, I would think, given everything we know at this point.
Right.
But we know, as we've seen, industries change over the decades and communities losing. IBM, when they consolidated here, brought various campuses, and something happened to those facilities and buildings, that's not IBM anymore. So the master plan should at least have some kind of strategy, at least a way of thinking, as to what if IBM, that large employer, did leave? Certainly there's lost revenue, tax revenue, if the property value has to decrease because of that. But the direct impact on Littleton residents' employment may not be all that great. I don't know the answer.
Unfortunately, we don't know the answer at this particular point in time either.
But what I'd suggest, and you folks see if you're in agreement on this, is the master plan should be, speaking of a strategy, as to if we were to lose IBM.
In general, I would call that managing transition. How do we anticipate that we're gonna manage what's gonna be inevitable? When, it's not a question of when, it's if, and, can we put things in place that will make it easier to get through? I don't know what the answers are, but that kind of idea of managing that and setting it up ahead of time and not having, hopefully you never have to use it, but when you do, it's there to use.
Business X with 3 full-time employees goes out of business is a tragedy for those 3 individuals, but the impact on the town is most probably negligible.
Just to add and make your difficult case is that the main source of revenue that comes from large companies being deposited, regardless of where you deposit them, is the churn, it's called, from their employees and others who go out and use services and go to restaurants and use the facilities of the town. The other side, it creates a burden to the town. That's why I find a lot of companies contributing, they don't get, any tips they get from the state are extracted from them from larger towns back out because of the strain that they put on resources. So you might get one indication, because there's more money in the churn than there is, frankly, in the taxes for most towns. Whether it's true for Littleton at this point, it's unclear. There is a study that the Department of Transportation did carry out that may give you a clue as to what is the contribution without the point to the churn in the town, and that is they did a study of where the cars went outside of IBM's, who is leaving town, and they tracked it through the license plate.
survey.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the answer is 98% of their employees live inside 128. Surprising. Anyway, it's a tough one.
One other one that we had was just the usefulness of the EdSat report. We just wanted to get some confirmation from the committee that that's something that we should be referring to, and that the findings about the positives and the negatives that report talked about in terms of economic development and attractiveness still hold true, and should we be using that in the economic development inventory?
If I may make a suggestion, direct contact with the person or persons who offered that, and find out where some of the flawed data is, and work it from there, because we spent $5,000 for that set.
We were given a grant for it, yeah.
We spent the,
Yeah, we spent that money.
Something else.
Yes.
So,
And it was based on self-reporting, and there was a meeting, okay, in which the business community of Littleton was not even represented. Okay, in other words, there was no one there. Maybe there's one person there who, for example, from the Littleton Business Association, maybe 2 were there. And they basically kept saying no every time certain other people in the room saying, oh, yes, we have this, and the answer was no, you don't. Example, there is no infrastructure, and trivial, infrastructure like intellectual property attorney, or even a practice that has experience in doing entrepreneurial stuff, or servicing that kind of activity for business. And that's a fairly good indicator of just how deficient, as opposed to efficient, how Littleton might fit in. The other thing is that that the website was discussed in the course of the meeting, and what was polled were information was brought forward by other people that people outside the community, outside Littleton, were asked about in business. What does the website look to you as someone who's trying to relocate? And a strong recommendation was made to really up the website, which the Economic Development Committee supposedly is supposed to respond to. But at this point, there's been no change in how Littleton presents itself
Well,
to
no,
this world.
there's actually an update on that, where the light department has offered the services of the people who do their website, and we have had initial discussions with the people. They're actually out of Florida, so we communicate by Skype conversations, and we've had meetings where we've discussed the content we want to see on there as a separate economic development page, so. It's a recent, past month or two, so that's going on.
Yeah,
bring this back to scope, because that's a segue from the EdSat results being
Right.
flawed. I would ask you to reach out to the personal persons who made the comments and see if they're willing to sit down with you for a little while and go through that. And there's two purposes. One is that we get the most accurate information we can for our master plan. But secondarily, if the folks who did the EdSat, if they have a flawed methodology, at least by our opinion, I'd like us to give them that feedback as a town, or we just did a poor job in town of responding to EdSat. So I guess there's three options there. Possibility is a better way to say it.
Yeah, be happy to do that.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right.
Great. There were some great comments about the discussion around the common, so we're definitely going to update that. And the economic development chapter in particular was written prior to the charrettes. I know it was presented after the charrettes to you all. It was actually written beforehand, so that's why you don't see that reflected in the write-up. But I think it's a great suggestion to go back and add at least some of the higher level points that came out of that charrette and look that people put into that from the community.
Skip the impact.
Yeah, I was just, sorry. If anybody wants to talk about anything I'm skipping through, just let me know. And then there was a subsection around the tax rates. We're definitely going to go back and revise how that's written and add a couple of things. You can see the bullet points, adding the ratio, and consider revising some of the discussion around the residential tax rate. So we want to make sure that that's accurate and reflects those comments.
Will there be comparisons to other towns?
That's in there.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we took the surrounding towns. Moving on to housing. A lot of there were a couple of typos that people caught, which is great. Thank you for that. Going down to the fourth major bullet, the 38% increase in senior population is not accurate. So that came out of the elderly assessment that was done for the town by the Donahue Institute. So in talking with Judy earlier in the week, she definitely agrees with that, and we're going to go back and take a look at that.
Yeah. If I can shorten your journey, in the original author and leader of the study that was done is, I think his name is Rinsky, and he, in his text, makes it very clear that the methods he used to project trends in where the population would go, there's a critical requirement of diversity. We can spend about 10 minutes on that one, but the important number is the minimum size to do this analysis for his methodologies. His methodology is not flawed. 15,000 is the sort of threshold, and that was missed by the Mass, whatever they are. They missed that in their report, which got picked up by the Council of Aging here in town. So no one's ever gone back and looked at the real deal.
Yeah, so we're gonna go back
So
and
just-
fix that.
In fact, it's more important that the conclusion is we don't really have a good handle on where the aging population, or age population is going to be. And that presents a planning problem for anybody. That's probably more important to know that. It's hard to plan for something that you can't measure. That's one of the things that Littleton has to look at.
Right.
That is that we can't get a good handle on that trend. It's going to go up, but how much? We don't know.
See, Paul, that fits perfectly into this concept that I'm trying to push, which has to do with the overlay south of the train station. Because, everybody I talk to says they need senior housing. They need a place for our aging population to move to. But we don't have the numbers to back that up. It would be great to have
And it
that.
makes things worse in the housing. You have a population analysis that shows that I don't consider these folks aging quite yet, but there's apparently a large cohort in this town, according to the numbers presented, that have lots of kids, or have kids. They're young, and they're
Right.
moving in. And the very factors, the other piece of it is, if you look at the recent studies done in Boston, the inflow has divided itself into income. So you're seeing a lot of younger people who've got heavy debt, et cetera, but still want to have families. They're going to be looking at Littleton and other surrounding towns. That's another trend that, by the way, Rinsky also warns about in 2015.
As you go about reassessing that 38% number, what I'd like you to do is contact Pamela Campbell, who you've already spoken
Yes.
to, Elder and Human Services here in town, and just talk her through a little bit as to why we're looking at that, some of the background to that, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
There was also a comment about trying to add some more information about the income disparities among income groups in Littleton. And in going back and looking at the section, the subsection under housing around affordability, I think that really could be beefed up a little bit more. I think that's something that we're gonna try and put some more effort into before we finalize the inventory.
Well, and if I can just comment based on what Mike just said, for example, in the Durkee Farm development that's going up over by the train station, if those houses are as big as they are, close to 3,000 square feet, and going for such a high price, I think you're right in terms of the population that the realtors are expecting to be coming here. So if the senior population is aging, we definitely need very clear numbers as to what those projections look like for the next 15 to 20 years.
There's a comment about the impact of the sewer system wasn't necessarily mentioned, and this, I think, was specifically in relation to larger scale housing development, multifamily housing development, and can that actually happen without a sewer system? Those kinds of developments are happening in places that don't have a comprehensive sewer system. What they end up doing, if they have enough land, they'll do a package plan, or they'll do some kind of small on-site treatment facility. So that could happen in Littleton, or if the town decided to build a sewer system, that's also another option.
15 Great Road, wastewater
right.
treatment facility.
That's right. We already have
200
one.
units.
Yeah.
So,
There's no talk at all about building a town-wide sewer system. Zero.
Very
Never
good.
has been.
Yeah.
Not in 18 years that I've been here.
The, when I was on the sewer study committee, we were talking about a modular system that could grow as, you build it for what you needed today, but it also had the capacity to grow in any direction, horizontally or vertically, being modular. But that got tabled for the time being.
And then just the last one, we were talking about this a little bit before the meeting started, a few of us, but there is a statement under the planning issue section at the end of the housing piece that states there's tension in Littleton among residents, boards, elected officials about how, why, when, and where to accommodate additional housing development. I think the team put this in there because it was sort of a reflection of the conversations that we've been having with folks so far throughout the process, and there seems to be camps on either side that think more housing development could be good if it addresses needs. Some folks would like to see Littleton remain the way it is, so there seemed to be some internal tension,
And that's not unusual.
and it's definitely not unusual.
Other towns, it's probably more usual than not.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that, Daphne.
Well, if it's not unusual, then the only suggested change I would make is that we reflect that in the commentary, that as in many suburban communities, boom, go ahead and say whatever you want.
Yes.
Yeah, and I
Or
would,
emerging suburban communities.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
rules.
I was gonna say either that or take it out altogether, because that's editorial. That's not really,
It's somebody's comment, though,
Yeah, no, I think a lot during the early part of the process, we did hear that from those that were providing input.
yeah, this, you're talking about a handful of people on two sides of a coin, and we got 9,000 people in town.
All right, let's not go down too much in the number. I think if they put it in context, as just describes it, that take care of it for you.
So long as it's quantified in some way, too.
Well, I don't know, you're gonna say it's 10 people, 100 people,
I wouldn't
Yeah.
feel comfortable
but
doing
for
that.
them to, I think,
But it's not, I don't,
contextual, as we discussed.
yeah, I don't think it's viral. I think it's I don't think it's as big as a lot of people think it is.
Richard, maybe I think we're looking at a face or a piece of the multifaceted issue about growth and preservation.
Yeah, it is what it
Yes,
is.
I think that's what we're really looking at. We're looking at one of the many faces of it. And I
Okay.
think if we put we put it in the context editorially, that as in the case of looking at trying to understand the limits to what we consider to be growth versus how much of development is going to comprise growth, put it in that context rather than just sticking to the tension notion.
Because that puts one concept against another.
Yeah.
And then, you're right, there's
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
actually a lot of concepts.
We good?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
press on, please.
Okay, great. So the last couple, I think we'll hopefully go pretty quickly. Under historic resources, just a lot of, just a few edits that we need to make, mostly just kind of either clarifying or changing things that we had in there. Under natural resources, it's missing the planning issues section. We know that's an issue, and our subs are working on that. There was one comment about there's no mention of impacts of climate change on drinking water supply, and I was just wondering if maybe Mike, I know you made the comment, could you provide a little bit of explanation about specifics?
Unfortunately, I'm literally out of my depth in this one, really out, because I went to the meeting about natural resources, and I think Master Finkler gave a masterful course in tutorial. And there were people there that had never spoken to each other from various aspects of natural resources, mainly water. And there were two gentlemen there who knew every source of water, natural source of water in this town, and others who knew where all the aquifers were, and down to the point I think we could squeeze them with a sponge. And what came through was that, unlike a lot of other towns that borrow or buy water from each other, we're not doing that yet. And I just asked the stupid question of what impact does more housing have on our water supply? And what I got back was, we're right at the edge, that if we build more, I mean, that was the view. Now, maybe I misunderstood, but that really got me going. Maren, I think you were at that meeting. I don't know enough to know if this was an assessment made by people who really are, embedded heavily, really taken with water and drinking water, but that really hit me as something that would concern me if I were doing planning.
Yeah, I'll follow up with Peter directly.
See if he has any notes on it, maybe
Yep.
Maren does.
Yeah.
And that's where my thing came from mainly. The climate change would just
We've got an
exacerbate.
untapped well site that I think the context I've heard it in is that, we aren't too far away from needing to get to that Neshoba Brook well site, which we haven't tapped into yet.
But in terms of climate change, I think the town is affected by climate change because the restriction that we have on our water supply is based on a regional measurement of the what do you call it?
The withdrawal rates
yeah.
are limited.
What do you call it? The big river that we have going through Lowell there. What's that?
Merrimack.
Yeah, the Merrimack River.
Yeah, Merrimack Valley, yeah.
Our region, our town's restriction is based on the water level in the Merrimack River. So if you don't think it's based on a regional thing or a climate thing, it certainly is.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll look at that.
And these droughts have already,
I suggest too is get a
Yeah.
hold of LWLD, excuse me, and find out what they're saying, because they're our water supplier.
Yeah.
It'd like heck for us to have the best idea ever, and we didn't discuss it with them first. So that'll make sure our best idea becomes the absolute best.
We can improve it.
Okay, so last two, open space and recreation. It was missing the inventory of open spaces. We had struggled to get an accurate depiction of that prior to releasing the inventory. I know Peter, Maren, and the Open Space Committee are currently in discussions about getting all that finalized, so before we put out the final inventory, that will all be in there. And then this one's also missing planning issues, which we know about, and we're addressing that now. And then the final section, which lumped together government and facilities and services, just a few typos, but under services, there were just a couple of points sort of specific to the budget, and I know Judy wrote up this section, so a little bit, I'm not as familiar with it as she is, but just if the committee could just read those four really quickly and just let me know if you have any thoughts now. We could also handle that in a side discussion if anybody needs to. But just wanted to point out those comments that were made.
Anybody?
Current staff capacity, is that to run the town in terms of, in the office here, DPW, is that what we're talking about, or the broad term, or?
Broad term.
Okay.
Both how many and professional competence.
That's right, and that's where I was gonna target too, because I think, I think we need more staff, but if we're gonna have a more complex management system, then we absolutely need higher technical abilities in that staff.
And some of that is definitely going to be reflected in the next piece, the recommendations and the implementation.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It was just missing from, there was nothing in there about how the town, what's the baseline? It was silent. That was the point.
On some of those points, the baseline tomorrow night will likely change because we have two articles funding a facility study specific to this building and then another one for fields, athletic fields. So those are both on the warrant. There's also an open space purchase, which will affect your inventory there. So stay tuned.
Luckily, we haven't finalized.
Wonderful.
Right.
The only other comment I would make is that the deficits in town growing to 25% due to personnel and retirement outlay. That's the definition of what that problem is a point of contention among boards and elected officials and appointed officials, and so,
Yeah,
I mean.
that shouldn't be presented as a cold fact.
Yeah, it's the idea of spending outpacing revenue is certainly agreed upon by all, but the nature of defining the scope of the issue and the terminology of the issue is what's up for debate.
I want to understand what you're saying, because it's sort of saying to loop back on itself, and so now I'm glad I brought it up, which is that would you please clarify, if you look at a line budget item for personnel costs, it has a projection based on the number of employees and their retirement and their benefits. So it's not a made-up number as far as I know.
That part's not.
Okay, so if the only way you could get that number down somehow or other is if you have fewer employees? I mean, tell me what you think
But there's two pieces that make the deficit. And the things.
Just talk about the rise, the
Well,
total.
I'm not going to, because that's only an aspect of what creates the deficit. We could have it go up like this, and as long as revenue went up even faster, it wouldn't be a deficit, would it?
Okay, so.
That's the
The
issue.
assumption here, let's start with the assumption that our income from taxes, or the incoming stays pretty much where it is.
No, so you can't make that assumption.
Oh, we can't make that assumption. Okay, so in other words.
You can make the assumption, but you can't guarantee it as fact. You can certainly
Fair
model
enough.
on that
Okay.
assumption.
Okay, I don't want, this is not the place to get in, but you see, that to me,
Right,
that
this
sounds
is-
to me like, I'm gonna play naive, obfuscation, okay? You either say straight out, if you make the assumption that incoming revenues are not gonna be able to, this is what incoming revenues would have to keep pace in order to, as it were, prevent such things as the rising cost of education, put whatever is in your happy. I mean, the schools, this is not against schools, but they're consuming the majority of the stuff, okay? So without presenting that as a baseline fact, laying it out crystal clear, it stays not hidden, but harder for the citizenry to get their hands on it.
So
and
this,
for
this,
planning
this is,
today.
right, I don't disagree with anything you just said, but how we have that debate and frame it will go a long way towards it.
Absolutely.
And the idea of deficits, because every year that they tell,
Can I say something? One
Yeah,
sec?
sure, go ahead.
Because we've used the word deficit way too wrong.
Yeah,
Too long and too wrong.
right.
We are not allowed by law to have a deficit.
Correct.
Okay, there will be no deficit.
There we go.
All right, first off, you may cut services, you may cut personnel, because revenue hasn't matched the expenses, all right? And that's a reality, and we face that. We can go back a few years where we cut a couple of slots in the schools because of that. So I think folks are cognizant of it. Now, is the broad residential population of the town cognizant of it? I would offer probably not. But it's not that it's not being addressed, and I think given the confidence that like Moody's has in the town, with the AAA bond rating as an example, is that it's being addressed, things like that are not known. I'd rather we don't use the word deficit.
Okay.
That we want to say that there's projections where revenue may not meet expenses.
Challenges ahead, however you want to do it.
That's fine.
Great.
And certainly personnel and the OPEB, the post-retirement benefits, the retirement outlay that is up there, are realities. And how we go about servicing it and trying to get the covered costs. And what's the technical term, Paul?
For
For future bills that have to be paid.
OPEB?
Yeah, well, that's the one we're paying it, and I'm going to lost for words, and I apologize to you folks. Doesn't matter.
I think you caught the spirit exactly of what the notion is, yeah.
Great. Any other discussion on this one, folks? Okay.
That's it.
Good, good job.
How many comments have you received so far? Little Kyle Buckley?
Like actual number of comments?
No, how many people have?
Oh, how many people? 10.
All right.
Okay.
So, welcome more comments.
Yeah, so folks, you heard some of the spirited discussion this evening. If you disagree with some of the comments made tonight, throw that at us and tell us why you disagree, please. But Maren, I'm going to ask you to repeat where they can find. Well done.
The website, there are hard copies, 2 hard copies in the library, 2 in the Council on
If
Aging.
TV would only cover that, that would be good.
Yeah. And
They're not showing it on
Oh,
the,
yes, the master plan website, www.planlittleton.org. If you go to the documents and data,
There it goes.
yeah, the
and
draft inventory is right there.
I also encourage everyone who goes there to take a look at the maps, because that really displays beautifully. It's worth the 10 minutes it takes. You get a nice picture of what's going on.
In the 18 November, which is this Friday, so it's just a few days from today, is an administrative cutoff that we've requested, so we have the best opportunity to work with the information you folks may provide us. It doesn't mean stop providing this information. You know, if you wake up on Thanksgiving morning and instead of going to the Rotary breakfast at the Littleton Middle School, you say, I've got a brilliant idea for the master plan, send it to us, please. There'll be another plug about the Thanksgiving breakfast, so hang on, folks. Okay, continuing on then. Anything else on the existing conditions report, folks? All right, when do we get the final? 'Cause this was a draft, right?
This is definitely a draft, and that is an excellent question. I will get back to you on that.
Thank you.
I mean, you're feeding this to us in pieces. If someone decides later on, this is always gonna be part of the report. If they decide later on that, hey, there's something in there that was wrong or could be adjusted, I assume you'd address those comments at that time, but you're trying to minimize the future comments going forward.
Correct. Going back after whenever we submit the final inventory, I mean, obviously, if there is some glaring error that all of us overlooked, and then we see it,
Yeah.
you know, later on, we need to change a number or something like that, that's not a big deal, but
Right.
we don't want to continue to be accepting comments all the way through.
Yes,
on that.
understand.
You don't want to be accepting the comments, I do. And the way I mean that is, while we have cutoff points, and we have to, go by that, otherwise we'd be in an endless do loop.
Yeah.
That folks come with us too, and as we have public discussions later on, they can help us inform better, even though what the document is, and that's in print, goes to press, we're okay with that. So the way I'd like to present it is, you will have administrative cutoffs that you'll deal with. We, as a committee, will continue to take inputs, and we'll deal with them as the committee and with our other officials in town.
The other thing about the administrative cutoff is that it is a snapshot in time.
Roger.
And so if you want to update it, because it is, life does go on.
For a military background, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Okay, so we're well aware.
So
Thanks for
you're up for a
reiterating.
job in Washington then?
That'd be a big negative. Secretary is sweeping the halls.
Are you a Christie band?
Okay,
Could be
Moving
more of a,
along, folks,
could be more
moving
of a mess
along.
than usual.
moving along. December public forum. Let's go down that road, please. Much less contentious.
Okay.
We think.
right.
Yeah.
Take that as a challenge, Mike.
Oh, yeah,
I did notice that Mike did say only positive things about the map. I wanted to know.
Don't give me
That
a
was-
swell.
No, actually, I thought I want to say I was actually very pleased to see, from my point of view, just how much information you managed to get in such a, a minimum amount of space. So I congratulate you on that, and, yeah.
Are there enough of these?
So there are 2 things about the forum. Well, 3 really, but we want to look at the format and think about how we're going to move to the next phase. We want to gather more input from the public so that we can inform the recommendations. And the recommendations are, just like Eric was describing, this is the baseline, this existing conditions. and the planning issues that emerge from those and an assessment of those existing conditions are one major way the recommendations are informed. Another major key component is the public input. What is the public willing to support? What does the public feel should be the town's priorities? And then lastly would be, best practices and the committee's kind of overview. So just wanted to give that overall context, because as we move forward, we want to make sure that we tune this to a way that's most useful to us, right? The information that we get. So the way we thought about it was to have, again, the community dinner from 6 to 7, but we would start the PowerPoint halfway through, so people could only chat for half an hour, and then they would be entertained by our PowerPoint.
Can I, last summer, when we were talking about the first community, I think it was, one of you folks suggested, we need attractions to get people in, and even mentioned, well, if we had a comedian or something like, well, and I mentioned that there was a girl who grew up, a woman who grew up in town who
Oh.
is,
I remember that.
well, I hadn't made contact with her prior to then, but I have subsequently, and date dependent, she'd be happy to do it. She could probably tailor a skit. So if anyone's
Stand-up?
interested, she goes around the country. She was just out in Chicago and whatever. So
Well, will she be here on December 7th?
that I don't know. I wasn't going to go out and make an offer on this one until I ran it by the committee here. But if you want another draw, or it's somebody local. I only brought it up because you specifically, or somebody
Right,
specifically
yeah.
suggested that as a draw.
So what does the
So
committee think?
I won't be offended either way, but if you're looking for something other than just food to intrigue people.
It's a great suggestion, Paul. Yeah.
Here's what I'd like to do first, though, before we decide some of the logistics issues. The stated purpose of this public forum is,
So the stated purpose of this public forum is to move to the next step, which is to start thinking about strategies and action steps to go from the existing conditions to the implementation plan. So it's starting to think about, and so as we go through this, you will see how we will think about, what does success look like, and what are some, who's going to implement this? What are some existing resources? So we're starting to think about how to move from where you are now to where you want to go.
That's it.
all right, so is it develop a strategy?
So.
Take us from existing conditions to,
Well, actually, it's not so much develop a strategy, but it's help us to develop strategies by telling us what you think, how you would measure success. How would you visualize success in terms of the goals? So we'll go, I think it might be clearer if we go through it.
yeah, to me, it's always clear when you state the purpose first.
So the
and then
purpose
everything
is to
supports the
to
purpose.
define success for each of the goals, because now we have a vision statement and a set of eight goals. So for each of the goals, we want to think clearly about what would make Littleton be successful in meeting this goal? How would we define that success? What would it look like? And then that will inform the strategies.
Okay, fair enough. Now, we've talked about draw, and that's the food. Okay, now, how does other entertainment of any particular sort contribute to the purpose?
To that. The only time the entertainment would be of interest would be during the dinner, because during the dinner is, the part where
Do we
it's
see it as a
community.
draw?
It could be, yeah.
In my mind, everything with a purpose.
yeah.
I like the idea external to this, but, why bring it into this project? If we think it helps with draw, 100% support.
So we
I
could
think
even
that was
ask
the only,
her, we could
thought
even
behind
ask
it.
her to tailor the stand-up to the town, talk about Littleton. I mean, I don't know how willing she'd be to
She
do
grew
that.
up here, so, yeah.
Yeah, so she maybe could,
Address the tension? All right, so.
or reduce the tension.
All right, so Paul's recommended that, and so before we go too much further. are we
Just
all-
offered
that if-
was more the, yeah. I didn't recommend, I'm just offering.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I don't have a stake in it.
All right, so it's Paul's action to see if the young lady will do this, and line her up, you'll be your agent. So you'll get 15% of zero.
Conflict of interest.
No, I just want to get a sense whether people say, I don't like that idea.
No,
That's, you know,
anything that helps bring more folks in.
That was how it was presented.
And she's a local gal, so, that, I think there's a plan on that, too.
And ask her if she can, even just a little bit, talk about Littleton, if
Yeah.
not the whole thing.
And I'm thinking, time-wise, even if she has a commitment that night, it's not likely to start that early, so it's probably.
And we wouldn't want her for more than half an hour.
Right.
And if she could tailor some of the, some of the commentary towards, towards
Yeah.
housing and
I
economic
don't-
development.
and I don't mean to be-
all that stuff.
Yeah, give her hunger, poor gal.
That's pretty funny right there.
Rural characteristics.
Right, right.
She could go to
I
town
don't mean to
on
be
that.
too mysterious about the name, I just don't want to throw it out there without her being committed to it, but
Yeah.
I'm happy to tell everybody off,
I
offline.
want to apologize for taking you off track, but I want to make sure we had.
Thank you.
Purposeful.
And I will look into that then,
Okay,
and,
thank you.
quickly.
Okay.
So we would have the community dinner and perhaps a comedian. And then halfway through, start the PowerPoint, which would be, we always have to assume, and we have to hope, actually, that we will have people there that haven't been participating to date. So we need to always review, and also just to remind people, why are we doing this? Where are we in the process? What have we done so far? What still remains to be done? And then to start a very, brief summary of, well, what have we learned so far in terms of the existing conditions, in terms of what we've heard to date from what people want. So we would review that in summary form, and then instructions for the evening, and that would include what we intend to get out of the evening. So, goals and outcomes. So what we were thinking was to set up 8 goal stations. And so what's a goal station? There are 8 goals, and they would be physically located in different places in the building. So we thought, depending on the turnout, we could have 4 in the cafeteria, then 1 in the music room, 1 in the luncheon area, and then we want also adjacent classrooms. We would want to have extra space in case of larger turnout, because we have the comedian, who knows, we could go to 300. So we would want to be sure to have as much space as we needed so that we could have some acoustic, people could concentrate. So at each goal station, there would be a committee member and/or consultants to help facilitate. And on the back of the agenda there would be a map of where those goal stations were located. So people, if they wanted to go to every goal station, they would have only 12 minutes at a station. But if they wanted to spend all night on economic development, we're happy to have them do so. Now, so we would let people know, 12 minutes is up. If you want to make every station, you need to move to the next one now. But you don't have to. Or you might choose, on the back of your agenda, I want economic development, governance, and housing. And then you know where they are, and you know how much time you have. So then, if you turn to the second page, for each goal, we would ask the following questions. The goal would be up there, right, in large print so people could see. So imagine a table now, right, and the goal is just behind you. So goal number 1, to maintain Littleton's small-town character as the town continues to develop through stewardship of its natural resources and open space, forests, working farms, and lakes. That's in the right-hand column. So how would you know that the town has met this goal? So here we just have some examples of some of the things, because sometimes people need prompts to help them understand what we're getting at. So what does success look like? Are there performance standards that would help us to measure success? For example, 100, and this is not for this particular goal, these are just in general, 100 new units of affordable housing by the year XYZ, 25% of roads have sidewalks on at least one side by, whenever, scenic views along the Great Road Corridor are maintained. So that's not a quantified measure of success, it's a qualified. Fewer people are commuting to work in single occupancy cars. There are more people in the town common area because there are more places to go, fewer vacancies. So what exactly do we mean by success is what we're saying, right? And how could we measure it, and how could we be sure it's occurring? What do you think it would take to do it, meaning achieve that success? Would it take money, political will, consensus, regional cooperation, increased staff capacity, increased public awareness, other? What? What would it take? And then what existing resources exist? Or should we say what current resources maybe, so don't repeat that twice. Who should be involved in making it happen? And then for each goal, the team is going to come up with a question and might be more than one, but no more than two, that needs more community conversation. We need more input before making a recommendation. So for example, for town facilities and services, do you think it's a good idea to create a combined senior and community center? We need more information about what people think about that before formulating a recommendation. Should the library renovate in its existing location or build a new facility in a new location? Should the town revise zoning regulations to encourage more affordable housing in Littleton? That would obviously be one around housing. Would you support the creation of a sewer system to serve the area around the town common and the surrounding neighborhoods? And as Eric pointed out, based on the response to that, then there would be several possible strategies, right? Who was talking about the incremental modular system that you could add
That's right, that's right.
over time,
Yeah.
or the package treatment plant, or townwide system. I mean, there'd be a variety of strategies, but first we want to know, is that something people are interested in doing before making that recommendation? So that's what the goal is, to understand what would people support, what do people think success means.
Have you read, I mean, there's a 207-page report that, the Bar Foundation paid $100,000 to study a sewer system. We have a specific plan on the table for a smart sewer system.
Right.
So, I mean, to ask and we have a vote tomorrow night on funding a first phase of it. I mean,
okay.
how can you not be aware what's on our warrant
Yeah.
for the town meeting tomorrow night?
I'm sorry.
Okay, because, I mean,
So-
these are asking questions when in several cases we're beyond.
So that's why we're doing this together. So if you could help us to
Oh, Paul, even
reword
after
that.
the vote tomorrow night.
Well, I'm just saying,
Regardless of
we have
which
we have a
way the vote
town
goes.
meeting tomorrow night. You'd think that would be in the pipeline of information that's being,
I don't disagree that maybe they should or should not know that, but I don't see how there's a
So these are
conflict.
examples.
These are just example
These are
questions.
examples,
These are
exactly,
examples.
thank
We
you.
may or may not ask these questions.
So I
Exactly.
have a question to clarify. So these burning questions that will be identified, are they based off the success measurement, or is it just a general question about that goal?
It's a general question about that goal that we feel needs more information before formulating recommendations. And what we are planning on doing is drafting these, sending them to you for comment, and then, setting them up into the,
And these are things you saw as common threads in the charrettes and the feedback sessions in the
Right.
past. I mean,
Right.
some of these have been hit the same note multiple
Yeah,
times.
things that may have come
Yeah.
up during the inventory that we talked about tonight.
Exactly.
All that kind of stuff.
just things we think, so we're planning, these were examples just to show you the kinds of things that had been coming up. We will draft these, send them out to you, give you a deadline for response, and then they will,
So now for the first time, we're putting some boundary conditions on residential response.
boundary conditions.
Yes, we're not asking them to say, what would you love?
No, that was visioning. We're now at the
Gotcha,
next
okay.
stage.
So I just want to be clear, we're now for the first time really going, okay, fantastic.
We need to start entering the narrowing phase.
Yeah, because you go like this, and then you go like this. So now we're now turning that corner.
So the formulation of these questions is not a trivial exercise.
No. It's not. So that's why we want to take the time as a team to formulate them, send them to you, hope that you will take the time to give us feedback so that the questions are the best that they can be and the most useful.
And maybe, how many per goal, 2 or 3?
No more than
type of-
two, really.
Yeah.
'Cause then it's
Probably-
overwhelming.
probably one.
We'll try to do one, right?
Especially if someone or multiple people want to hit all the different stations, we don't want to necessarily overwhelm them with, you need to do these 10 things at every station.
Exactly.
You only have 12 minutes.
So, for example, here we had two for public facilities, but that might be rare. We would try to keep it to one, but it does depend.
Well, I can see there'd be more likely fodder for land use policies, and natural resources and those kind of things than in historic preservation won't have probably too many questions. It might, my gut tells me, so it may be on average, we're looking at more than
Right.
two, but it could be that some might lend itself to have more than two.
That's fair, that's fair. So we could say average equals one.
Is it your experience from the interacting with the folks who have shown up, that 12 minutes, let's say somebody sees all of this and could naturally misunderstand or choose not to understand, I want to hit all of them.
Planning board.
Is it your understanding that how many residents would be happy or pleased to spend 12 minutes at each station, doing this, as opposed to, I want to spend time on all of them, and 12 minutes isn't, I'm just playing a scenario out.
So the question is, how many people do we think would want to spend time on all, and how many on less than all? I
guess
don't understand the question, I'm
at
sorry.
At the first cut, I guess what I'm concerned about is that there's only so much time in the evening, so much time X, and you can't do everything.
Right.
Okay? But since this is the first time that we're presenting what we call boundary conditions, it would seem to me that this would be quite, shall we say, stimulating to whoever shows up. And they may want to basically spend a lot more time doing this exercise beyond the one or two that they happen to fall into or choose to fall into. And I want to cover open space, but I spend all my time on land use.
Well, we will indicate every 12 minutes that 12 minutes is up, so then they can regulate their time. So we'll keep the rhythm going, that they could spend 15, but then they'll cut to the next. And the other thing that we're planning on doing is having it be a running, so it's not that each time you come to the station, you start from scratch. What we will do is, whatever input we get from the first group of people will be up then on the wall, so you walk in and you say, oh, that was my idea, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That makes me think of, let me add to that. So it's not, so in a way, when you're a second time participant, in other words, you've come and another group has been before you, you don't need as much time because some of the obvious or more common responses will already have been documented. But I understand what you're saying. What would your...
You've seen our residents in action.
Yes.
To me, they get very absorbed. I mean, I just.
So in the charrette, the second charrette, some people went around and some people chose to stay.
Right, yeah.
So I think, that's how people are, right? Some people are single agenda people, or they have 2 or 3 areas they're really concerned about, and others would like to take a wider look. So we're just giving them options.
I'd offer that the technique has proved successful in teasing out the elements we're seeking
Right,
in your previous experience.
right. And we're giving options. Now, do you have a suggestion as how that could be improved by, I think, increasing the amount of time? We're already asking them to come from 6 to 9.
No,
I don't think that's fair.
No, I'm thinking, I don't know what term to use, I'm thinking of homework. I mean,
Oh, I see.
no.
So one thing is that we are going to be creating, if you look at the third page here.
Yeah,
So we are going to have a handout, which is going to be a Littleton at a glance, which will be a summary of the existing conditions, like the key points. And that perhaps we could even put some of the other questions up ahead of time,
We can
right?
try to do that.
We could try to do that.
I was thinking of post, in other words.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm not interested in arguing that we ought to extend this out.
Right, but you're saying give the information ahead of time.
No, I'm saying that part,
Oh.
you know more about than I would, has more to do with, I wanted to do land use, and I never got a chance to do it.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Oh, I
Mike.
see.
Yeah.
And maybe we can do that through an online forum.
Right, right.
Yeah, something where they can go home, think about it, and fill in
And
the
then
blanks.
continue.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. And then put a deadline on, please get it in by a certain
So
date.
online follow-up.
That's a suggestion,
I think it's.
Yeah, it's a good one.
just in case.
Yeah. So, and then we'll try to have that set up by the forum so we can announce it. So the other thing is, we want this to be continuing to build on where we are, right? So we're building on the existing conditions assessment, and that's why we're sharing the findings. We're building on the public participation and input we've received to date. So in the topic areas or the goals, where we had the charrettes, we will have extra information there to show them what was discussed in case they weren't there, a summary, photographs of the maps. In the case of the town common, actually have the model there, so that people can, we're moving forward. We don't want to lose that momentum. So we're going to try to incorporate, sort of, here we are, this is all the work we've done to date, this is all we've learned to date, now let's move forward.
I understand that you don't want to lose that as a starting point, because it's got a lot of good work that's gone into it, but just going to the timing piece of
Mm-hmm.
things. They're going into that space, and maybe they didn't go to any of the charrettes, they haven't gone to the
Right.
website.
Right.
It's gonna take them almost 12 minutes to kind of to digest the previous stuff, so how do you,
Well, so the facilitator there will be there to sort of help them through it, so it's not just this, this is what this is, this is what this is. If you're planning on spending just a few minutes here, this is what we need to focus on. If you want to spend more time, then, here's the area where you can.
yeah, I'm kind of thinking that we go right, I think you gotta cut right to the chase to get to where you wanna get covered for
Right.
that, and say, if you really wanna spend some time in.
So if we go to the
Begin
second
with-
page, we're thinking
Question
that,
around maybe to stay here for multiple stations, but.
Exactly.
But this is what we're trying to get done in this 12 minutes. or
Yeah,
so.
we're really trying to figure out some way to make sure that we acknowledge all the work that's been done through those charrettes, because I think we gleaned a lot of really great information.
and we don't want it to seem, if people can build on that, that takes us that much further. So for example, one thought was, those science fair 3-panel boards? It could be a summary on the left-hand side, which is kind of a summary of the comments, in the middle, photographs of the maps, and on the right-hand side, the priorities. So then people could just take a Post-it note and comment on it.
How much of this, I think you know where I'm going with this comment, how much of this, in your experience, could you put online? Maybe we could get our television stars to come out again. I mean, I'd like to reach as many as possible, make this as convenient and easy for everyone, especially since you're going to frame the questions literally. I'm just wondering, is it worthwhile to duplicate, to what extent can this program be presented online?
Well, I guess we have to think about that and develop, and, because it depends also on what online tool we're using. And there are some that you can purchase that are more flexible than others. So if we're going to use our existing tools, there are some limitations. So we'll have to think about that.
Am I the only one who's worried about this? Because, about,
Worry is a strong word.
but is anyone
You worried
concerned?
about
Does anyone
failure?
think that we should make this as widely as available
No, in
as
fact, when
possible?
we get to the outreach plan, which is
Yeah.
on the agenda,
I saw it,
we will
yeah.
speak to all of that.
Okay.
So how much time did we have in the second charrette? Was it 20 minutes per station?
I believe so, yes.
Because that felt okay at 20
Yeah,
minutes.
at 20 minutes, right.
I agree. I felt like it started to get a little repetitive.
Yeah, I
about the
think it
20.
Yeah.
well, but it's going to be, it has to be precise.
Yeah, and also, the charrette was more fluid, right? It was more, there was a lot, this is much more specific. Asking questions.
Do we give any thought of never even suggesting that they go to each one of them?
Oh, so just asking them to choose and,
Yeah, let them make up their own minds what they want to do.
And then have an online
for their follow-up.
post-assessment for, I didn't get to go to historical.
And I
the one on
really wanted
historical
to.
preservation, I really wanted to go to that
I
one.
mean, if we publicize early enough exactly what the options are, they'll make their own choices. And they have time when they get there to look at them, and you can do a
That's
good
right.
job up front, and they can see what their choices are.
What the choices are.
Because frankly.
Well, on the back of the agenda,
Right.
it will be.
Most people aren't gonna have that broad an interest, that they're gonna wanna go to all of them.
Well, that's our thought. So that's why we're saying, for those few, we would ring a bell and say, if you really want to go to all
Figure
of
it out.
them.
If they wanna sprint back and forth, they can. Because I think if you suggest it, some people are gonna feel like, well, that's the goal.
They're compelled, yeah. Oh, that's a thought, yeah. So what do the others think about that?
I think that at the opening of the charrette, you could probably say that something to the effect, well, if you want to move around,
And then just leave it at that.
We'll do the math.
that's it. Yeah. But, you know,
40
don't-
minutes, 12 things, blah, 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 blah,
Time's
blah.
up.
Or maybe post the rules beforehand so that they can know what's coming.
So post,
The rules, like the overall rules beforehand. Just broadcast that.
so we're saying there aren't really any rules, we're just saying, this is if you want to do it this way, you do this, if you want to do it that way.
Okay, the input we're
Yeah,
giving you
th-
tonight,
those-
when can you have the process outlined, whether it's Word document, PowerPoint document, something that we can disseminate to the community? When can we have that?
So, sort of, kind of telling them what will happen?
Yeah, whatever we want to call it, rules, processes, procedures.
Yeah, it's really the meeting outline. the
Yeah,
more
it
detailed
is,
meeting outline.
exactly, meeting outline.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing is, I think it's some good thoughts, is you still have 8 stations based upon the goals. but instead of kind of making it like robo-dating, speed dating,
Speed dating.
where you do it where
Robo speed dating.
it says, sorry, where you say,
I like that.
it's, the goal was that maybe you hit 4 of these. And if you hit 4 of them, it's 24 minutes, and that seems to be a reasonable amount of time, and then if they want to do more, they can comment online, but
Or
at
if
least,
they're- or if they're
but that
going-
still
yeah.
seems manageable.
So then are you suggesting we make that suggestion, or we just say, look, these are the 8, you do as you please?
I think that's what you should do.
And then whoever wants stays at 1, whoever wants goes to all, and then everything in between.
But I do think the facilitator would kind of want to give people a reminder that says, hey, if you want to move on to the next one, this is the first quarter.
Right,
So,
Right.
so you may want
Can
to
do
move to the
that.
next
Yep.
station.
Yep.
okay.
But it can be explained beforehand.
Yeah,
Like,
it needs to be,
yeah.
right. So, okay, we'll try to put together,
Because you're going to have a PowerPoint slide for that evening that's going to describe
Oh,
what
yeah.
we're going to do that evening.
exactly.
So when can we get that slide so we can disseminate to the community at large earlier?
Friday.
Friday's
I
good.
think Friday is
Okay? So
reasonable.
get that by Friday, please.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right, before we get
What's
further
what's
on,
your, sorry, PJ, what's your preferred media? PowerPoint?
I think it's PowerPoint.
PDF.
Anything
Because
can
that's
go
what
up
we're
on
gonna use
TV easily
anyway.
enough. And folks can send it out. They can cut and paste into a regular email if they so choose to send it out also in other forms, but.
And also it's most efficient, because that's what we will
Yeah.
be using.
All
Yeah, I
right.
just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah, no, no, I
Before
know.
we get further into the outreach plan, then you got the committee's role. So tell us what you want us doing.
So, the committee's role is, so the committee will be receiving written instructions for their facilitating responsibilities at this, but really it will be the questions, leading people through the questions and how to document those. So you will be receiving those.
Can we have those Friday also? And there would not be the night of.
Yeah.
Right, no, it won't be the night of.
Digest.
It won't be the night of.
And can we broadcast those questions?
So that's a question. I think that's what Mike was sort of after. It's up to you.
As
What do you
once
think?
we receive, I think should be good to.
I'm not following you, Renato. Which questions you want to ask?
No, the questions that we are, we
Are
are
you
going
be
to.
presenting?
The
Yeah, we
burning
are going to
questions.
present, yeah.
The burning
So
questions.
the o-
So there was your frame questions. They want, the question is, should those
Right,
questions?
so, but but the only thing is that we have to formulate the burning question ones, send them to you, you give us your feedback, so that'll be, I assume, after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I think they want to give some real good thought to these, let them digest what's been done today. I think 3 days is kind of fast for them to
We
do that.
could just do the, what defines success questions, and then just say, we're gonna have a burning question.
All right, here's how I'd like to approach that. Working backwards. The public forum's on the 7th. Let's have it so it's ready to be released to the public on the 2nd. That's a Friday. That gives them that weekend, 5 days, calendar days. And if someone's interested, they'll pay attention to it and do something about it. If they're not, you can give them 2 months and they wouldn't touch it, so it
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
exactly.
Yeah,
So 7 December, the forum, 2 December is released to the public. Considering next Thursday, a week from this Thursday is Thanksgiving, you got to get it to us probably by the 23rd, so that over turkey, mashed potatoes, and sweet potatoes, and squash pie, and everything else we're going to have.
I think Peter's hungry.
What time you start?
We can get input back.
The
And
draft questions.
When would you need the
Burning
input,
questions.
when would you need the input back from us? If we're going to release it on the 2nd, how many days do you need prior to that from our inputs?
Probably that Tuesday.
29th? That's what I was thinking too. Is that okay? 29th, which is a Tuesday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if the release is going to be done in a Word document or in a PowerPoint.
Okay,
That's
so you
fine.
get it to us by the 23rd, please. We'll send you back inputs. You digest them and regurgitate them as best you can by the 29th, so that you can, we'll get our stuff back to you on the 29th, I should say, so that you've got a document that can be released on the 2nd.
This is the question specifically we're talking about?
Yeah,
Yes.
with Renato's suggestion.
Yeah, I suggest the questions be in Word, so that's easy to
Right.
follow the edits and stuff like that, and make comments. The
Yes, you
agenda
can
can
do-
be PowerPoint and something like that,
Yeah.
but. it-
But just for the highlight,
With the hi-
yeah, highlight changes.
Right.
Yeah, someone, these are those burning questions that we'll be asking. And here's an opportunity for you to do a little homework, and come prepared to give good answers, You can put a preamble as best you think necessary. Is that good?
It's good.
Okay. Anybody else, anything to add to that? Does that begin to allay your worry / concern?
Yes.
PJ, just a quick question on the Word doc. Is everyone comfortable in Google Docs? Because then everyone in real time can see everyone's edits.
Good point.
Otherwise, with a Word doc, you know, you're gonna edit, you're gonna edit, you're gonna edit, you're gonna edit, send it to me,
Yeah.
and if there's conflicting
I have no
comments
problem.
and stuff.
Okay, so to Eric's question, everybody comfortable with Google
Yes,
Docs?
yes, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
No problem.
I've been lost in it before, so let's one more time.
All right.
Yes.
Mike Zellin is no less uncomfortable in that than anything else.
Whoever gets the last edit wins, that's how that game works.
Now, this is going to be totally on you guys, the framing of the questions, because that's an art form.
All right, the outreach plan.
So just one comment before you get to that, on the agenda, so the intent is to get us some thoughts on the agenda this week, is that right? Or
Friday.
Friday.
Friday? Okay, any
It
comments
would
back?
sort of be basically what Daphne just described.
Understood,
you know,
but just
the
tweaked
purpose
based
of the
upon what we
meeting,
just
the
talked about.
station, the idea about the stations. You
Kind of
have,
structure.
you know, you can visit as many or as few as you'd like, kind of thing. So.
Gotta say, every day's a check ride,
And,
so.
because I do think it would be helpful if I wanted to forward, hey, the flyer and an agenda, a couple weeks in advance, if we can work through that, say by Thanksgiving, if we could wrap up something that could be easy, go past the package and just to forward to
So
our
hopefully.
network, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a great,
The agenda, always, I don't need the questions worked out, but the agenda always to say, hey,
Right.
put in a calendar.
so that you'll have by Friday,
Okay.
yeah.
As I said, every day's a check ride, so here's your check ride. What's gonna be the opening comment on what you send us Friday?
The opening comment
What will be the
or
very
the
first?
the subject?
Very first set of words.
Oh,
After the word purpose would be, please give us the
Suspense?
purpose. Oh. Guys, have it written down what the purpose of the forum is.
oh, yes.
Okay.
Well, we always put that on the agenda as well, yeah.
Yeah.
But for this Friday, we'll have that
Yes,
too.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you. All right. All right, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, outreach. All right, so this is a proposed, and thanks for doing it. Did you do this? Well, you guys are special, because that's the community liaisons, I was gonna bring that up. So well done. So as the team's suggestion here, if you look at the sheet that was just handed out on the outreach for the townwide, we know who we've contacted before as far as some of the organizations and the like. Let's continue working out to those. Now, we also had, is this on here, the committees and the boards that we were liaison to?
So, no, this is not on here, but that's in the outreach plan, the full one. This is kind of an abbreviated version for you to, we can talk about.
Does everybody remember the committee that they were
So
assigned to?
we'll just send it out.
And whatever Joe was working on, if Anna, you could pick up, please. I don't remember which one Joe's had. So, and if that doesn't work out for you, if there's another committee or board in town that you feel more comfortable, you think better able to address, ask you to look at that one then, please. And whoever has responsibility for it, get with him or her. Thanks.
And if you wanted also to look at the liaison here on the first page on the left hand, and if there's something you wanted to join, feel free.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to highlight on this?
Yes, so in addition to the reminding everyone of their liaison responsibilities, we'd also like to ask, is there someone who, for this particular time period, is unable to fulfill those responsibilities because of other commitments, so that others can take up that slack?
I actually honestly don't remember doing signs with Rich last time. What did we do last time, Rich?
I called Maren.
Okay, I think we can handle that.
Wait a minute.
Actually,
When I
yeah,
look at that, it's like, I don't, sandwich boards, LED, banner, highway department, I mean, there's none of those we actually do for ourselves, other than just notifying somebody. right?
Maren had Bill put up the letters on the sign,
Okay.
and then all we decided was the language, I think.
Okay,
Yeah,
Well,
Bill,
it is about notifying, yeah, that
Yeah,
someone has
okay.
to notify.
all right.
Bill puts the,
It's more being the
boards together.
quarterback of signs.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you're actually
You
going to
actually not
change the
actually
letter.
put them, yeah.
Myron, you notified?
we,
Thanks for your help.
and then all we have to do is figure out kind of.
Well, if you want me to run out and put the signs out, I'll do that.
Okay, you
have a
guys,
Same-
you
same
guys
as
work your
before.
logistics.
So you guys have your subcommittee on signs.
I won't go up on a ladder to put the banner up.
So
I
is
won't
there
do that.
anyone who's unable to do their liaison responsibilities for this forum? Okay, so if that's the case, then you want to make sure that all the email blasts go out, but primarily to use your own personal networks, friends, family, any organizations you're a part of. And then the really big thing that works, if you look at the gray little box at the bottom, is if you personally invite 5 people to attend. But when I say invite 5 people to attend, call as many calls as it takes that you can get 5 yeses. So it's not just, I made 5 calls, I left 4 messages, and one person said maybe. It's, you make as many calls as it takes to get 5 yeses. And that actually is quite successful. So, the other thing is we talked about, the hard-to-reach populations. So we want to think about them again. We want to think about making sure families with young children, how are we going to get them to come? Maybe they need a little bit of a special invitation. Seniors who stay home, single seniors, those without internet access, low-income population. We had talked about ethnic groups in town, especially reaching out to the Chinese Bible group. So revisiting all that.
Are we going to have a babysitter again?
I think we decided no, right? Childcare?
That didn't come off.
I know, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
So press the second page, press release.
It's worth noting that someone can go to one of the stations for the thing they care most about and go home,
Yes, that's right.
You know?
That's right, actually.
so it's not,
Oh, yeah.
it's not an all-encompassing
Yeah,
thing.
we can talk about that when we do the TV too. We can just
Yeah,
say,
sort
you
of
know,
talk about it. We could talk about it maybe
We're not
as
gonna
sort
lock
of
you
being
in
like an
this time.
open house, right? So would you be opposed to calling it an open house then? That kind of sends that message a little bit, right? I know. Usually when it's open house, you do it on a Saturday and,
We
Well,
can't
you can
deferring, we're somewhat deferring to your
What?
professional opinions on this, and expertise.
well, that's usually when we say open
The key
house,
words
we
are.
we mean that people can come and go as they please and it's not a beginning to end meeting. So,
I know, we've been saying public forum for some time now.
Right.
Do we confuse people?
exactly.
Right, and that's not
We could
how-
call it, we can call it like open house style. Do you know what I mean? Like public forum,
Okay.
open house style.
It's public forum number 2, and then you can put.
Yeah,
the-
that's what I
the
mean. I didn't mean to
subtitle.
call it that as the
Okay,
title.
folks?
Yeah,
Right.
public forum.
And get the
Press on.
message across that,
Yep.
okay.
I think also highlighting the dinner part is important. I know that we received this flyer in the electric bill.
Yeah.
this week, so that was a nice surprise.
Yeah, LELWD does a good job for us, that sort of stuff. So,
And we made sure we got the word dinner on the sign boards.
all right, press on.
So on the second page, on the back side of this, it's just a reminder of the area newspapers, even in the ones in the surrounding towns that you talked about, that people read those sometimes more than the actual local. Flyer distribution should be shared. Last time, I think it fell to only a few, so you might want to decide amongst yourselves.
Oh, I distributed everything. But people, like, all the flyers went. So,
Right.
like, how many do I print? Like 50 or, I don't know, 30, 40, something, yeah.
I think it's about 100
I think
last
there
time,
were
I think.
more, yeah.
We got 300 here tonight, but they're for tomorrow night. We'll talk about that here in a moment.
Okay. So 300.
No, that's for tomorrow night.
Oh, okay. So how many are you thinking of printing for the distribution? Since it already went out on the electric bill, I understand that.
Yeah, get back to you.
Okay. So in addition to distributing the flyers, you want to also post them on the community bulletin boards that we identified last time?
That's usually what they have.
Yeah. And then use cable. We had talked about maybe the Stars doing another,
Yeah, it says Mike
Star
Zeldin down here
performance.
across his
Yeah,
name
you
out.
get that off there, you
I
definitely
wrote
don't want
it
me
right in
there. I think you two guys or Paul, I mean, you're much more photogenic,
Yeah, there's a
and you
couple
also
errands,
have
yeah.
access to more food, I mean, all that stuff.
he can be so positive when he wants to
When he's trying to
be.
get out
What?
of the zone.
It'll be half the time if these guys do it.
Can I bring my dog?
Oh, sure.
That might be, you know. So, social media now,
Melissa?
Melissa usually does that, so we'll have to remind her. And then the town website, posting it.
Now, we do have a couple of new members since the last time we had these lists, so I don't want to let Bartlett or Anna off the hook here.
So, Bartlett, would you like to join any particular circle of effort? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we can do that. Thank you. Yeah, we can just send it right in and just send it right out.
Never not to have some company.
I think I'm going to focus on some of those hard-to-reach populations,
Thank you.
and anybody else who needs help. Happy to lend a hand.
So the other things that we had talked about, and I don't know how relevant they are for this particular, you know, is there's a once-a-month veterans breakfast. When is that? Is it in time to?
Police and fire department organize that. I mean, they just had one last week, so, yeah, probably won't be in
No,
time.
not in time, okay.
That was the second Wednesday last week, right?
Yeah.
Senior bingo?
I don't think there is,
Really?
yeah. But there's a,
Well, there is, no, at the Council on Aging upstairs there, they do it
They
like
do?
daily, I think.
I thought so too.
We could probably send the flyers. I need Pam.
Yeah, just send it to
I
Pam.
did already share it with
Oh,
Council on
okay.
Aging.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
done.
Do they put them on those, the buses, the vans that pick people up, because they're doing a couple hundred trips a day?
that's a great idea.
That's a great idea, yeah.
Yeah, and they have a men's breakfast and a ladies' breakfast once a month. It's Council on Aging. So if we got that to them, they could distribute it for those events too.
Now, can the van be used to transport people who can't make it?
We could certainly request.
So if she gives them, she could tell them that as she distributes it or as she announces it?
The only challenge is the hours of operation
Right,
are, I think,
exactly.
until 5 maybe or
But
something.
in other communities, for forms, then they can, if they request it,
That's
say
something
24 hours in
we could-
advance.
Because it would cost her money, but the way to
Yeah.
do that is, we could use some of the budget here.
Right.
Yeah, so Maren, if you just take that, get a cost estimate from her.
And then if there could be some way of giving the information and how much in advance she needs to know.
Okay.
Like, is it 24 hours? Is it?
And I already did get feedback from groups of seniors who have called in and said, okay, I need to sign up this 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're already communicating and planning on driving together.
Oh,
So,
perfect.
great to see that.
So are there any other events between now and the forum, the townwide events? where the
There's a breakfast, Thanksgiving breakfast. right?
Thanksgiving
Yeah,
breakfast.
Rotary.
There's a holiday bazaar.
Oh, yeah,
When is that?
3 December, Saturday.
Okay.
that's very popular.
There's town meeting.
Yep.
Is tree lighting a good opportunity as well, or
Maybe for a
not?
sign or something, sure.
that's on the 4th?
The sign committee has spoken.
Well, it's also in the comment, making your sign thing easier. You can hook it up to the lights.
There you go.
Flashing.
Christmas lights.
Flash, you flashing.
So who is going to attend these events? Is anyone attending them anyway? For example, the Thanksgiving breakfast?
Yes,
You're attending anyway?
oh yeah, I'm washing dishes, yes.
Good for you. So you can bring some flyers?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Don't get them all wet.
Well, I never leave the kitchen, so they
So you
they
just-
don't let me out just for the
That one
right reason.
time, that one time they let you.
No, they bring me to the very back door of the.
All right, let's work the specific logistics on this one. Okay, tomorrow night is town meeting. I've got 300 flyers already printed up for town meeting that Maren did for us. Okay, well, pass that out. So you highlighted who will not be at town meeting, so we can all ostracize you. Okay, so everybody's gonna be at town meeting. Can you be there at 6:30? And help me hand out the flyers as folks are coming in?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
All right?
Yep.
yeah.
And I think it may, good, then you could talk to people also,
Yeah.
help energize it that way. All right, so that's town meeting tomorrow night. Now, the Thanksgiving Day breakfast. I was going to be there, I'm not. It's Rotary sponsored breakfast every Thanksgiving morning, 7 to 10. Are you going to be there, Mike?
Yeah, I won't be there.
All
I
right.
have to be. Yeah.
Are you going to be there? Okay.
Where is it, Paul?
at Littleton Middle School.
Okay.
It's an away game this year, nevertheless, we still do breakfast, whether it's an away game or a home game.
Ooh,
Before
the game.
football game.
And then
So-
It's an away game, though.
Oh,
to air.
oh, okay, sorry. I thought it was there.
All right, so you'll spearhead at least the breakfast, and maybe get some of the Rotarians to help hand out some of these
Sure.
puppies too as they come in. We can put them at the front door where people coming in to pay. Okay, the bazaar. I'll be at the bazaar. Well, it's gonna be there.
How do you, what's a proper pronunciation for
I don't
that?
care right now. You gonna be there?
No.
All right, never mind then, you don't get to key. Anybody else gonna be there?
I'll be on the road that day.
All right, so Anna, between you and me, we'll do that. I'll talk to you more about getting more copies of the flyers. Okay, the tree lighting, that was a good idea, because it's a somewhat different demographic. Families with young children populate that one. I'll be there, you'll be there, yes, no?
Probably.
The tree lighting on
I won't be
4th.
there for the tree
It
lighting.
started off at about 4 PM.
Yeah, I'll come to that.
Okay. All right, so again, between that. All right, so that's good then. So tomorrow night's covered, and then breakfast between Anna and Mike, we'll get you more copies. And the breakfast is on Thanksgiving Day, the 24th of November. Rotary Responsive Breakfast, 7 to 10 a.m., Littleton Middle School, folks.
Rain date? Or snow date?
For Thanksgiving?
It's indoors.
It's snowing in New England today.
Thanksgiving's going to be on the 24th, period dot, blizzard or no.
Okay.
The schools will be closed that day. Breakfast will be open. The bazaar is on the Saturday, the 3rd. That's, when do you open, at 9 o'clock? I forget. If you're there at 9 o'clock, you'll be okay. And then spend the day and spend a lot of money, folks. A lot of organizations in town, it's a big fundraiser for them. Help them out there, and there's always really neat stuff. You know, Community Gardens does a great job with floral arrangements, evergreen arrangements and the like. Boy Scouts are there. Pick an organization to support. The Rotary response to tree lighting, that'll be starting at about 4 PM on the 4th, which is the Sunday. And then maybe a special visitor coming in from a place where he needs a passport, you know, somewhere around the North Pole. Might be where he lives.
Another immigrant?
It's okay.
So, second to last comment, and this was actually Michael's recommendation last time, to have what he called a benign presence in the library, have little slips of paper in the books. So, one interpretation could be that when we develop the questions, we could have them in the library. So
And
that's the benign.
Mara can expand on that a little bit. She's worked out something with the library director.
Oh,
Yeah, the
Charrette
models
maps.
from the charrettes.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, Peter's gonna deliver 2 of them to the town, and the library's agreed to find a place to display those before the December meeting. Just give people a little view of some of the work that's been done.
and then maybe next to that can be a flyer, and next to that can be the questions.
There you go.
So last thing is to repeat that you
Take care of that
have
for us,
to
please.
commit to making as many calls as it takes to get 5 yeses. So that's,
And the way to score that, so we know if she's rejected, when people walk in, they say, we're not
Who?
percent me. We're not percent me.
who called you, and we'll be taking notes.
I don't know any, I know you guys.
All right, for the RKG, do we have anything else for them this evening?
Just one thought on the forum. I know we're not gonna have childcare, but, we did have some opportunities, at least for kids, as part of it, to show kind of, you know, their vision through whatever means. Would there be can you think of something we might wanna do similar for this forum? I'll just post it out there.
So are you saying in case children come?
Correct. Maybe a question or two
Sure.
that they could answer.
Oh, yeah.
In their
Mhm.
context.
Yeah. And then we should say children welcome over the age of
Eeks.
18?
I would be careful on
I'd be
that
careful.
one.
I
I saw a number of,
Oh, I've done that many times when they do that.
Yeah, I've seen a number of people come in with kids on their arm, and even if they
Right.
stay there for half of the session, that's better than
Right,
zip.
exactly.
So I would not put
Oh,
an age
so,
limit.
oh, so not.
No age
okay.
limit. We'll deal with
No, but-
anything if it's an
And the other
issue.
one-
Just in
We
terms
have a
of,
bouncer to handle all the riffraff.
those
One of
questions
them
would be
three
targeted
limits.
probably to kids, 9 and above or something.
Right, right.
Okay, we're all done with that?
Yep.
I have a question for you guys. What's the most recently completed master plan you folks have done for Littleton, I assume in Massachusetts town?
Massachusetts. Oh, jeez. Last year was Milton, Mass.
Here's what I asked you to do. For Friday, go back.
Acton was,
Yeah, find out who it is. And then would you send that to us electronically, please?
the actual master plan? So we're a team of different firms, so one that we've done together
Well, RKG, the last one is RKG.
That RKG as their,
RKG.
as a prime.
as a prime.
It wouldn't hurt, but I don't know how much you've teamed previously with the same team, so that may be a thing, but certainly RKG is our prime. And I'd like to see that, because that'll offer us some thoughts to ask questions as we prepare to do our own final, okay? So, can we have that by Friday? Or if you need to check with Judy, that's fair enough.
I do, we,
Yeah,
I got one comment too.
go ahead.
All right, on page 54, the map that shows the historical ages of the houses, there's nothing on that that I could see that predates 1900.
It's the way that the assessors label, it's in the assessors database, basically anything built before, I think, 1901 is just categorized as 1901.
1901 and forward, because there's a lot of houses before 1901.
I know.
And didn't the Historic Commission do a survey of some of the earlier ones? I don't know if you've touched base with them or not, but they had got a grant to do just that. Maybe you remember that, Maren.
Right, but not to the number of houses that'll make a difference on the map.
Okay.
They went with, for the mapping.
But it starts in the other direction, right? Isn't
But
it?
from the map, for the mapping, you start with a Excel spreadsheet, and that came directly from the assessor's data. So that's where that is all in. You pick up the half dozen or the dozen houses that predate that were assessed. You're not gonna see a difference on the map.
Oh, I bet you see about 30, 40, maybe 50.
It's worth pursuing what they have on
I
data.
understand the question, but the number that they've assessed is not all 30 of them.
All right, let's do this. You're the most knowledgeable on the
No,
30,
I'm
40, or
not.
50.
Yeah.
So if there's 30, 40, or 50, if you could get with the Historical Commission and see if we can improve the fidelity of the
All right,
information we
then
provided them, please.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
good.
all right, I'll do that.
All right. Anything else for RKG this evening? Thanks, folks. We
Okay.
appreciate you coming on out. All right, a plug. The Littleton Planning Board is sponsoring a community conversation Monday, November 21st, from 7 to 9 p.m., right here in this room, 103. It's housing choices for senior citizens and their families. What are Littleton senior housing needs? What does the senior housing industry look like in eastern Massachusetts today? How has it changed? What options are available to Littleton to address the housing needs of its senior citizens? What about Littleton families with an elderly relative? What would the community like to see and where? What are the opportunities, the hurdles? The Littleton Planning Board sponsoring a housing choices for senior citizens and their families, Monday, 21 November, 7 to 9 p.m., room 103, right here. Okay, I'll take motions on the minutes, starting with September 6th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moving second, all in favor?
Aye.
October 25th minutes,
So moved.
Second.
so moving second. Any comments? No, of course not. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, good, there's no nays. All right, I want to hit the budget real fast, folks. If I use a term that's from the federal government, I apologize, and I'll explain if necessary, but we use the term expended and committed. And committed doesn't mean it's been expended yet, but it's already put against a known requirement. So that leaves us, right now, $35,000 of uncommitted money, okay? We are going to be putting another $2,000 or $3,000 towards the Skinner, at least, yeah. So let's call it 3K. So it takes the 35 down to $32,000 of total available budget come the end of December. Okay, and that includes Maren's salary through the end of the program. So we just need to keep an eye on that. I think we're okay, because as we look at what else we have going on, we'll have another public forum. There's another $3,000 or so there in the future. But as of right now, absolutely committed, there's $35,000 remaining, okay? So Maren will get these all to your email if you have any more questions. Then Maren, have this updated. We don't meet again as the committee.
January.
Till January, right? I know you handed that out to me, and I apologize. Yep, there you go. So what's it look like in the future for us folks? December 7th at Littleton Middle School, the public forum. And then this committee meets again on January 10th. I'd ask you folks to reread the existing conditions, just in case you missed something on the first or second read, and make this your third or fourth read perhaps. And if you've missed something, get it to the consultants, please, as soon as possible. All right. Any other business, folks? All right, entertain a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
We got it.
Thanks, folks, have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.